That afternoon was one of the most unexpected, yet strangely intimate moments I'd had with my dad in years. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. The only sound breaking the stillness was the slow, steady ticking of the clock on the wall. It was just the two of us. Mom had left about an hour ago to run errands, leaving us alone in the house. Something that rarely happened anymore. There was something different in the air, though I couldn't quite place it. I'd only been back home for a few days. My first year of college had flown by, and returning to the house where I'd spent most of my childhood felt surreal, like stepping back into an old photograph. But it wasn't the same anymore. I wasn't the same, and neither was Dad. He still looked the same, of course, strong, steady, with that familiar worn-out grin that made it seem like nothing could shake him. But since I'd come home, something about him had been off. His smile felt smaller, his laughter shorter. His eyes, when they met mine, seemed to carry a weight I'd never noticed before. Now, sitting in the living room together, just the two of us, the air felt thick, charged with an unspoken tension. The late afternoon sunlight streamed in through the windows, painting golden shadows across the carpet. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, a couple of beers between us. At first, the conversation was light, small talk about college, the neighbors, and how the old neighborhood had changed. But then, the words faded, leaving only silence. That's when Dad spoke, his voice quieter than before. "You must have met some interesting people at school." He hesitated. "Anyone you trust?" The question caught me off guard. "I guess." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at the floor, his fingers tapping the bottle in his hand. "It's good to have people you can count on," he said finally. "Because sometimes, you can't handle everything on your own." There was something in the way he said it that made my stomach tighten. I could tell this wasn't just small talk anymore. Something was pressing on him, and he was skirting around it. Before I could respond, he shifted closer. Not in a threatening way, but with a quiet urgency. "I haven't told your mom this yet," he said, his voice low. "But things at work, they're not good. And I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." I felt a rush of confusion, concern, and something heavier. The realization that the man I'd always seen as unshakable was carrying more than he let on. "I just needed to tell someone," he admitted, looking at me for the first time. His eyes were tired, but there was also relief in them. "You've grown up a lot. I can talk to you now, not just as my kid, but as someone who understands." The sunlight had shifted by then, spilling softer across the room. And for the first time in a long while, we sat together in the quiet. Not as father and child locked in old roles, but as two people, facing the weight of life together. I felt my pulse quicken. This was happening. This was real. Dad's hand was on my shoulder now, firm and steady, and I knew the conversation was about to take a turn I hadn't expected. But the story didn't end there. I should have said something sooner, asked him directly what was going on. But instead I stayed still, my thoughts racing. He looked at me with an intensity that was hard to read, somewhere between worry and something heavier. "Look," he began, his voice quieter now. "There are things your mom doesn't know yet. Things I've been keeping to myself." I swallowed hard. "What kind of things?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the stale smell of beer between us. "It's just between us," he said firmly. "I'm trusting you here." The words echoed in my mind, making the air feel heavier. I should have asked more questions, but my throat felt tight. 1,000 possibilities ran through my head, none of them good. The sound of a car engine outside made both of us freeze. My heart jumped into my throat. Mom was home. The slam of the car door cut through the moment like a knife. "Go upstairs for now," Dad said quickly, his voice low but urgent. I moved without thinking, my body on autopilot as I headed for my room. My legs felt unsteady, and my mind was a blur. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to slow my breathing. What had just happened? What was he hiding? My thoughts tangled themselves into knots. Downstairs, I could hear Mom's cheerful voice as if nothing in the world was wrong. Minutes passed like hours until I heard slow footsteps on the stairs. A soft knock followed. "It's me." Dad's voice came through, quiet but steady. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, every instinct telling me to say no. But instead, I whispered, "Yeah." The door creaked open and he stepped inside, closing it behind him. His expression was unreadable. The tension between us was almost suffocating. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice gentler now. "I didn't mean to dump this on you like that. I just didn't know who else to talk to." I stared at him, my mind spinning. "What is it, Dad?" He stepped a little closer, lowering his voice. "Things at work are falling apart. And there's more, but I can't explain everything right now. Not until I figure out what to do." Footsteps downstairs interrupted us. "Paul, honey, where's our son?" Mom called from the kitchen. Dad's jaw tightened. "You need to go down there before she comes up. And please, don't mention any of this yet." I nodded slowly and followed his instructions, even though my mind was still buzzing with questions. When I reached the kitchen, Mom was unpacking groceries, humming softly. She looked up and smiled warmly, completely unaware of the storm still raging inside me. "Hey, sweetie, I was just about to call you for dinner. Help me set the table?" I forced a smile. "Sure." As I placed the plates on the table, my hands shook. Slightly. On the surface, everything looked normal. But I knew things had changed, and there was no going back. I tried to steady my hands as I set the table, forcing myself to act normal, though every part of me knew something was wrong. It felt like I'd been dropped into someone else's life, one where the rules I thought I knew no longer applied. "Where's your dad?" Mom asked, glancing around. I froze, the question catching me off guard. "He's upstairs," I said finally, my own voice sounding hollow. "He'll be down in a minute." Mom nodded, satisfied, and turned back to chopping vegetables. "You two have a nice time while I was out?" she asked casually. My throat tightened. The weight of what Dad had told me earlier pressed down on me like a stone. "Yeah," I said, barely above a whisper. It was fine, but it wasn't fine. Nothing about this felt fine. Dad came down a few minutes later, calm and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. He kissed Mom on the cheek, then glanced at me briefly, a look I couldn't read and didn't want to. We sat down to dinner, the three of us. The conversation was light, Mom telling stories about running into old friends at the store, Dad nodding along. I barely spoke, too busy keeping my emotions in check. But underneath my silence, the tension still hummed, thick and suffocating. Every time I looked up, Dad's eyes met mine. Not in a threatening way, but with a weight that reminded me of the conversation we still hadn't finished. After dinner, I excused myself quickly, retreating to my room before either of them could stop me. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it, letting out a shaky breath. My chest felt tight. My thoughts were a whirlwind I couldn't untangle. How had things gotten to this point? I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the afternoon over and over. His words, the worry in his face, the way he'd said there was more he couldn't tell me yet. A soft knock on my door pulled me from my thoughts. "It's me," Dad said quietly. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, every instinct telling me to say no, but instead, I nodded. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. His voice was softer this time. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to put so much on you." "You did," I said, my voice small but steady. Dad's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I know. I just needed someone to talk to. Things at work with the bills. I'm not sure how to fix it all yet." I looked away, not sure how to respond. "We can't keep doing this," I said finally. "Not like this. It's not normal." "I understand," he said after a pause. "We don't have to talk about it right now. But I need you to know, I trust you. And I care about you more than you realize." The room felt heavy again. But this time it was the weight of unspoken truths, not something darker. Finally, he stood and opened the door. "We'll figure it out," he said and left. I lay back down, staring into the shadows creeping across my ceiling. I knew it wasn't over. There would be more conversations, more pieces of the truth. I just didn't know if I was ready to hear them. I tried to keep my distance from Dad as much as I could, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the weight of what he'd told me days before. His confession lingered in the air like a shadow I couldn't step out from under. I knew he felt it too. He was quieter now, more careful with his words, but his eyes would still find me whenever we were in the same room, as if he was waiting for me to speak first, to decide how this strange new reality between us was going to work. Mom, completely unaware of the undercurrent between us, moved through her days as usual. She'd smile, ask about my classes, tell Dad about errands and old friends she'd run into, and I envied her ease. To her, everything was fine. To me, it felt like the air in the house had changed. Late one evening, after Mom had gone to bed, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Dad. Again, the dim light above the stove cast soft shadows on the walls. "I think we need to talk," I said suddenly, my voice cutting through the quiet. Dad looked up from the table, his expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think we do." I swallowed, my heartbeat heavy in my chest. "I don't know what's going on between us," I admitted. "But I know we can't keep pretending everything's fine." He nodded slowly, still watching me. "You're right, but feelings aren't always easy to manage. They're harder if we ignore them," I said. "We need to set boundaries. We have to stop letting this hang over us." Dad stood, closing the space between us just enough to feel the weight of his presence. He didn't touch me, just looked at me with tired eyes. "I never wanted things to get complicated, but they have. And now we have to fix it," I said, trying to sound steady. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt thick but necessary. Finally, Dad nodded. "You're right. We need to stop before it gets worse." A small sense of relief loosened my chest, though it was mixed with sadness. We couldn't go back to how things were before. Something had changed permanently. The next few days were tense but manageable. Dad kept more to himself, and I focused on getting ready to head back to school. The heaviness in the air started to thin, even if it never fully left. The night before I left, Dad knocked softly on my bedroom door. "I just wanted to say goodbye," he said, standing in the doorway. I nodded. "I'll see you at the holidays," I said, trying to sound casual. There was a pause, and then he spoke quietly. "I love you, you know." "I know," I said, my voice low. "I love you too." He smiled. A sad, tired smile, before turning and walking away. When the door clicked shut, a strange sense of finality settled over me. This chapter was ending, but its impact would stay with both of us for a long time. There would be more to talk about in the future, more to work through, but for now, this was enough. We had taken the first step toward moving forward.